In this lesson, we will cover the textbook introduction and Chapter 1. PHP stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. The way it works is, you write the PHP code, your PHP code creates HTML and web page content. That HTML and content represents a web page, and the web page is displayed in a web browser. So, PHP generates HTML for a web page that's displayed in a web browser. PHP is a scripting language. It would be similar to JavaScript, where it runs by using an interpreter, instead of languages such as Java and C++ that need to be compiled. PHP code can be included in the HTML of a web page, and you'll see many examples of this throughout the textbook. PHP is a server-side technology and runs on a web server. PHP is a server-side language. PHP will only run on a web server, unlike HTML and JavaScript that run in a web browser on the client computer, such as your laptop or your phone. PHP does not run in the web browser. PHP generates HTML for a web page that sends the web page to the web browser. And the steps for processing PHP are: the web browser, which is the client, sends a request for a PHP page to a web server. Then the web server, which is the server, processes the PHP code and creates the HTML and the content for the web page. The web server returns a response containing the web page back to the web browser. The two images on this slide represent the steps that we just described. Everything starts with a request. The request is sent from the client to the server. The server handles the request and sends a response. If the request is for a static web page, that is without PHP, as in the second image, then the server simply sends the web page as a response. If the request is for a PHP web page, as in the first image, the server has to run the PHP script to generate the web page. Then the server sends the generated web page as the response. To write and run your PHP code, you will need the following: a web server that can run PHP code. Most web servers include PHP. For example, I'm using FreeHostia and it includes PHP. Or you can install a web server with PHP on your computer. You will need an editor to write PHP code. Any editor that will create a plain text file will work. Don't use word processors or spreadsheets such as Microsoft Word or Excel. They create files that include special characters that will cause your PHP code to fail. And you'll need some way to copy your files to your web server. Most web servers include a file manager feature for copying files, or you could use a file transfer such as SFTP. The next few slides include a refresher of HTML. You should already be familiar with HTML. If not, you can use almost any HTML tutorial on the web. I use w3schools.com as examples in class, and a link to their tutorial is at the bottom of the slide. HTML is hypertext markup language. It is the language that's used to create web pages. A web browser reads the HTML code and displays the web page. So you create a web page using HTML and display the web page, which includes the HTML, in a web browser. HTML is a tag-based language. It uses tags to tell the web browser how to display the web page content. Each tag has a special meaning to the web browser. For example, the H1 tag tells the browser to display a heading 1, and the EM tag tells the browser to display with emphasis. You can see from the sample code that H1 displays the hello world as larger and bolded text, and the EM displays the hello text in italics. You write HTML code in plain text. You can use any text editor, code editor, or IDE that will create a plain text file. There are several examples in the textbook and slides. Choose whichever one you're most comfortable with, but don't use a word processor or spreadsheets such as Microsoft Word or Excel. They create files that include special characters that will cause your PHP code to fail. I would recommend that you use a code editor instead of a text editor. Code editors have features that make coding a bit easier, such as syntax highlighting. To show the difference, I have the same file open in a code editor on the left. This is Notepad++, and a text editor open on the right. This is Notepad. The code editor is much easier to read, especially when you're working with large and complicated code files. I will use Notepad++ for most of the examples in class. Use the following steps to create an HTML file. Open your editor, create a new file, enter the HTML code for the web page, save the file with the .html file extension, and open the file in a web browser to display the web page. So now let's walk through each step. I will use Notepad++ as my editor, so I open Notepad++, then I create a new file, then enter the HTML code, save the file as welcome.html, then double-click on the file name in File Explorer to display in the browser. Make sure that you use complete and properly formatted HTML code. Otherwise, the browser has to guess what you meant to display your web page. Sometimes it guesses correctly and other times it doesn't. The web page may or may not display correctly, so don't let the browser guess. Always use correct HTML. A quick note on encoding. Encoding defines the characters that can display on a web page, which means it defines the languages that can display on the web page. You use the meta charset tag to set the encoding. Visit the link at the bottom of the slide for more information. As we stated previously, PHP is a server-side technology. It runs on a web server. It does not run in a web browser like HTML or JavaScript. The web browser is a client-side technology. PHP processes as follows. The web browser sends a request to the web server. The web server runs the PHP code to create the web page. The web server sends the web page as a response back to the web browser. PHP code is different than HTML. First, any file that contains PHP code must end with .php. The .php tells the web server to run the PHP code. The PHP code will not run without the .php file extension. For example, if you have two files, say index.php and index.html, the index.php file will run the PHP code. The index.html file will not run the PHP code. Make sure that any files that contain PHP code end with .php. This is a very common mistake when your PHP code won't run. Next, all PHP code must be between the PHP tags. The PHP tags are the less than $PHP and the $greater than. You can see this in the code example on the slide. Any code outside of the PHP tags will not run. And, as we've mentioned several times already, PHP must run on a web server, which means that you have to use the URL for the PHP file on the web server to run the code. Look at the example URL in the slide. To run the PHP code in the page.php file on the example.com web server, you would have to enter the URL example.com/page.php. The PHP code will not run by opening the PHP file in the browser. Visit the link at the bottom of the slide for more information. The steps for creating a PHP script file are similar to creating an HTML file. Open your editor, create a new file, enter the PHP script code, save the file with the .php file extension, copy the file to your web server, run the file using the URL on your web server. The main difference is that you create a .php file and you upload it to your web server. So let's walk through each step. Open your editor. I'm using Notepad++. Create a new file. Enter the PHP code. Then save the file as phpinfo.php. I'm using FreeHostia as my web server, so I'll use the File Manager tool to upload the file. Finally, run the file using the URL on your web server to the phpinfo.php page. I typically use the File Manager tool on my web server to upload files. That's actually what I used in the previous example to upload my phpinfo.php file. Most web servers provide this feature. Otherwise, you could use a file transfer tool such as FileZilla to upload your files. Where you upload your files on your web server matters. You will always have a root folder. On FreeHostia, this matches the domain name. If you upload your file to your root folder, then the URL to run your file is pretty simple. It's your domain name / and the file name. For example, the first example URL on the slide is your domain name / phpinfo.php. In my case, it would be my domain name / phpinfo.php. And since I didn't upload this file in my root folder, I'm actually getting an error. Your web server will get very confusing if you put all of your files in the root folder. Most of the time you would organize your files within folders. So if you create a folder for Chapter 1 called Ch01 and upload your file there, you would need to add the folder name to the URL. It would be your domain name / the folder name ch01 / and the file name. For example, in the second example URL on the slide, it is your domain name / ch01 / phpinfo.php. In my case, it would be my domain name / ch01 / phpinfo.php. Again, this generates an error because I didn't create the ch01 folder and I didn't upload my file in that location. On my web server, I like to add another folder for each class. So I create a CIST2351 folder under the root folder. Then I create the chapter folders under the CIST2351 folder. You can see this on the screen on my FreeHostia web server. So the URL on my web server would be my domain name / CIST2351 / ch01 / phpinfo.php. Print is a PHP function. We use the print function to send information to the web browser. In this case, we would print the word something. Something is a string in PHP because it's surrounded by quotes, and we will learn more about strings later. One thing to notice here is that all PHP statements must end with a semicolon. This is a very common mistake. Your code will not work if you forget the semicolon. Another note is that you can use the echo function or the print function. They are nearly the same. Visit the link at the bottom of the slide for more information. Now we're going to create a PHP script file named hello1.php to display a text message in the web browser. Open your editor and create a new file. Enter the PHP script code and save the file as hello1.php. Upload the file to your web server then run the file using the URL on your web server. Notice that the first part of the message was created with HTML and the second part was created with PHP. The PHP code follows all the rules that we discussed previously. The PHP code is in a .php file. The PHP code is inside the PHP tags. The PHP statement ends with a semicolon. The file was uploaded to the web server, and the file was run using the URL on the web server. There's lots of information about PHP available on the web, but the official PHP manual is located at www.php.net/manual. It contains a description of every function and feature in the PHP language. You can quickly look up any function using the www.php.net/ and the function name. For example, www.php.net/print displays the documentation for the print function. You can use the print function to include HTML tags in a web page. Remember that the print function is used to include information on the web page that is sent to the web browser. The information can include HTML tags as well as text. In the first code example, you see that Hello World will display bolded using the bold tag. In the second code example, you see that we are creating a hyperlink using the anchor tag. Also notice that both statements end with a semicolon. All PHP statements must end with a semicolon. Now we're going to create a PHP script file named hello2.php that displays HTML and text in the browser. Open your editor. You can start with the hello1.php script or create a new file. I'm going to create a new file. Enter the PHP script code and save the file as hello2.php. If you started with the hello1.php file, be sure to save the file as hello2.php. Upload the file to your web server. Then run the file using the URL on your web server. Notice that the first part of the message was created with HTML and the second part was created with PHP. In this case, the text created in PHP includes HTML, specifically the span tag. The PHP code follows all of the rules we discussed previously. The PHP code is in a .php file. The PHP code is inside the PHP tags. The PHP statement ends with a semicolon. The PHP file was uploaded to the web server, and the PHP file was run using the URL on the web server. Comments are notes or documentation that you include in your code. They can include anything that you would like to say about your code, but typically describe how your code works or describes why you did something in a certain way. They are highly recommended and can be incredibly useful. It is very common for you or someone else to have to come back later to look at your code. It is much easier to read a comment to try to figure out how something works than by reading the code. Comments are not processed in PHP, and they are not sent to the browser. Use the / for single line comments. Use the /*/ for multi-line comments. Visit the link at the bottom of the slide for more information. Let's create a PHP script file named hello3.php that includes comments. Open your editor. You can start with the hello2 PHP script or create a new file. I'm going to create a new file. Enter the PHP script code and save the file as hello3.php. If you started with the hello2.php file, be sure to save the file as hello3.php. Upload the file to your web server and run the file using the URL on your web server. Notice that PHP comments and HTML comments are different. Also notice that PHP comments are inside the PHP tags and HTML comments are outside the PHP tags. PHP does not understand HTML comments. You will get an error if you put HTML comments inside the PHP tags. Any PHP comments that are not inside the PHP tags will not be considered as PHP comments. They will be treated as any other HTML web content on the page, and they will be displayed in the browser. A bug is any problem with your code. Eventually, you will have to deal with bugs in code, whether it's your code or someone else's code. Debugging is the process of finding and fixing bugs in code. As a programmer, you will spend as much or more time testing and debugging than programming. You want your programs to work as expected under all circumstances. The only way to know that it works is to test it. Your code does exactly what you tell it to do. Testing is the way you confirm that you get the results that you expect. Debugging is a huge topic, and not all debugging techniques fit all situations. In general, you can try the following. PHP must run on a web server using the URL to the web page on the web server. It will not run directly in the web browser. Make sure that the functions that you're using are supported in the version of PHP that you're running. Not all functions run in all versions of PHP. Make sure that you have display error and error reporting turned on. With these settings, you will see error messages that you would not see otherwise. You can also check the HTML for the web page by using the View Source feature in the web browser. This will show you the actual HTML for the page and may show PHP errors. And take a break. Sometimes you just need to take a break and think about the problem in a different way.